deterministic predestination type of thing where we're sort of automatons doing whatever God. No, but God's God, and God has all sorts of ways of helping us to obey those commandments.
Scrooge says the spirits can do it all in one night. Of course,
that's right. Nothing's impossible. That's right.
Let me just suggest that we just found, in a way, a theme for today, which is the end. And I would like to just throw out the fact that I mentioned last week that a lot of people believe there wasn't an end, that this was a story about a manic depressive personality like Dickens, and Scrooge was going to go back another way the next day. And I think we'll have some further comments about what's built into this ending to suggest that it really is, for the sake of the story, a permanent change. So that may be the question. Thank you, Roy. What is the end?
That's right. Well, in fact, the way that the chapter, that this last stave, in fact, the whole story, right, does not, it's beautifully ambiguous, right? The end of it. And you take a look at the end of this stave. And in fact, this stave does not end with Scrooge. It does not end with Tiny Tim. It does not end with Bob Cratchit. It ends with you. So may it be said of all of us. God bless us, everyone. So it actually ends. And if you remember my point long time ago, how many weeks? That was 18 weeks ago, I think, when we started this, right, nothing wonderful can come of this unless you understand that Morley was dead. And so from the very beginning, the point of this whole story, the end, in a sense, the end of this story has not been the redemption of Scrooge, although that's important, but it's been the redemption of all of us who read this. And I know in my own heart, and I'll just, again, I was raised Pentecostal, and so I'll have a little testimony service right here. I know in my own heart, reading this text, yet again, particularly reading it in community this year, has been transformative for me. And again, I'm getting weepy right now, so you'll have to start talking pretty soon. But it's really been a beautiful, heart-rending, heartwarming experience for me, myself. So anyway, somebody else talk. I'm gonna sit over here and cry, so.
Well, I pulled up the beginning of this stave just so we can have it in front of us and we kind of explore from here. Go ahead, Father Casey.
Oh, I think it actually quite fitting. One of the things as I reread through this stave that stood out to me is very early, where is it? His sobbing violently. And that he, as he sort of like emerges out of this extended mystical experience, that these waves, this flood of emotion sort of just washes over him and manifests in tears, but they are tears, and they're not just tears of relief. It is the initial outburst. It's the initial sort of physical outburst of what I think is the bubbling up of joy and gratitude. And it has just gotten me thinking of how joy is. Well, there's a great line from the theologian Teilhard de Chardin that says that joy is the infallible sign of the presence of God. Mm-hmm. And I think that Scrooge's joy, which is, he what does it say? He frisks, he exults, he laughs. His laughing is almost sort of like, it's just he just is giddy. And but the first manifestation of that is that he just is sort of caught up and he is sobbing from his relief and his joy and his gratitude.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's the transformation that you've mentioned in all its somatic characteristics, its bodily characteristics, reads like real, and then you've just given it the sort of that it's a physical expression of a spiritual change, which is a wonderful way of thinking about it. And it takes us back, of course, to the beginning when Scrooge was a boy himself, and all of the other kids were going home for Christmas. And in a number of the adaptations that you, Father Casey, have mentioned to us, that's a nice scene. They have the kids coming out of the school and going home, riding horses or taking a cart or something, except in one adaptation where they're all going back to the schoolroom from the city. That seemed the wrong direction. But that giddiness, that childhood, even reduced to a baby at the beginning. And it also, of course, is that wonderful passage in scripture about Nicodemus that if somebody wants to read.
Sure, let me switch out of this and switch back over to our PowerPoint. There we go. This is from the Gospel according to John, the 3rd chapter.
We can't see it.
Can't see that?
No, we're in the graveyard, which is where we want to be.
That's really weird. I don't know why I switched on my end and it didn't switch on yours. Let me just, can you see it now? No? All right. Bear with me, please.
We are experiencing technical difficulties.
We're all going to laugh.
All right, here we go. View slideshow, which will start me over. Now, this is from the Gospel of John, yes? And I'll read it and then we can talk about it. Now, there was a Pharisee named Nicodemus, a leader of the Jews. He came to Jesus by night and said to him, "Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher who has come from God, for no one can do these signs that you do apart from the presence of God." Jesus answered him, "Very truly, I tell you, no one can see the kingdom of God without being born from above." Nicodemus said to him, "How can anyone be born after having grown old? Can one enter a second time into the mother's womb and be born?" Jesus answered, "Very truly, I tell you, no one can enter the kingdom of God without being born of water and the Spirit. What is born of the flesh is flesh, and what is born of the Spirit is spirit. Do not be astonished that I said to you, you must be born from above." And I've made a little note on here that there's this wonderful wordplay that gets all mixed up in this, that the word translated here being born from above is anothen, and it can mean being born from above. It can also mean being born again. And so Jesus says you must be born from above, and Nicodemus says, how can anybody be born again? And Jesus says, you got to be born from above or you're not going to be saved. It's just, you miss all that in English. So I thought I'd add that. But for purposes of the carol and Scrooge's rebirth, which we're definitely seeing here in this stave, either works, right? He's been born of the Spirit and he's been born again, hasn't he?
That's right. He's a baby, right?
He's a baby.
And he doesn't care, right?
He's a schoolboy.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so you remember the Ghost of Christmas Present spreads laughter through the world when he goes around as a blessing. And that laughter, I think the Nicodemus passage is kind of funny because Pharisees are hardly ever funny. And this guy just can't figure out the biology, and really, and the point that he can't figure out the biology is exactly what it's about. It's about spirit, which is not inherent in flesh, isn't that right?
That's right, absolutely.
But you can do it with laughter and joy. That wonderful Teilhard de Chardin quotation about joy. Yeah.
So in this, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. It's fine. I'll catch up in just a sec.
So this section here where Scrooge is fussing with his garments, and remember that his eyes are wet. This really delights me, and we sort of touched on it, right? There's this outward and visible sign here of an inward and spiritual grace. There's something sacramental almost happening with him right now. His hands are busy with his garments all the time, turning them inside out, putting them on upside down, tearing them, mislaying them, I love this, making them parties to every kind of extravagance. And I wonder if stick with me on this, but he has 3 times been drawn under something, has been pulled under 3 times. And in the process, he has died a death to an old way of life. And he emerges from this threefold diving into something wet and giddy and new, with a heart of flesh instead of a heart of stone. And it feels a lot like there's a sort of baptism to a new way of life here.
The next metaphor, it again piles a new set of ideas around making a perfect Laocoon of himself. And of course, that was a sacrificial, because that was the prophet who was trying to warn his people about the coming of the Greeks. And the gods came down and sent a serpent, big monster, to take Laocoon and his two sons and kill them, so that prophecy couldn't be heard. So it's getting you from Greek myth as well as from Christian myth,
And it's wonderful because we've talked a little bit in our conversations about allusion, because Dickens very often alludes to other types of things. And here, and I made the point last week, and I didn't know it was going to pop up so quickly, but sometimes allusion shows a parallel, and sometimes an allusion shows a difference. And here we have Laocoon, right, who, it's a horrible judgment that's put on him. But here, it's almost a comic type of thing. He's struggling with his pants and his shirt's like snakes, and he's getting all tangled up. And so it's an illusion, but it's an illusion sort of showing the joy of this instead of a harsh judgment of death. So again, it's just a beautiful, of all the things that Dickens could have chosen to show about this type of getting wrapped up in stuff, he chooses this one. So it's really ironically beautiful.
I suppose I'd have to add as well, we saw all these clothes being sold in the rag and bone shop, and here they are restored. So it's almost like new clothing is a part of a new body and a new spirit. And to that degree, it is, Scrooge is not Laocoon, and his prophecy is available for the Trojan to see here. So it's also the reverse, as you say.
Right. Yeah, that's beautiful.
But Father Casey said he was going to jump in.
I was, building on this, I just continue to be struck that the transformation is not only about him, and this is a horse that I know I beat. It's not only about some sort of personal realization, in the same sense that faith is not only about a personal decision that we make for ourselves that stands alone upon itself, and that all that matters is that we have made that decision. But it propels Scrooge out. So what does he do? He doesn't sit there basking in his newfound sort of like revelation and relief. He doesn't fidget his day away. He immediately runs to the window and speaks to the very first person he sees. And later, my favorite scene in this whole stave is when it says, he went to church and walked about the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro, and patted children on the head and questioned beggars, and looked down into the kitchens of houses and up to the windows, and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that anything could give him so much happiness. He emerges out into the world and realizes that the world means something completely different to him, and that this isn't just about him, it's about every interaction he has with every single person.
Right? I mean, the whole creation is made new, exactly. Right? Just like it says in Romans, right?
Exactly.
So everything is new for him.
Look at it again in terms of the second stave, the end of the first stave, when the window goes up and Scrooge sees all the moaning people that are, didn't walk forth in life. And so we've had the same opening up the window in the second stave that takes Scrooge out to Christmas past. And now the window is opened once again on the world of the present. And it is a redeemed world in Scrooge's eyes and feelings as a result of the way he sees again.
For me, go ahead, Mother Rebecca.
To Casey's point, there is no fog, there is no mist. It is clear, it is bright. Nature is remade.
The sun is out.
That's right. it's sort of, it's the beautiful, right? Because it's a 5-stave story, right? And so you have the 1, 2, and 3, spirit, 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 and then you have the introduction, Marley's ghost, and then the end of it. And the parallels between the first, I feel like we should do this just one more week and go back and read stave 1 again. Now that we sort of made the whole circle, because remember, he meets certain people in that first stave, right? He meets his nephew. He meets Bob. Well, Bob is obviously there. His clerk is there. He meets the guys looking for money for the poor. But you remember, he also meets somebody else, and that's the little boy at the door who starts singing, "God bless you, Mary, gentle man," right? And you notice the very first person that Scrooge, in the whole story, the very first person that he wishes that he could have done something different was that little boy. As soon as he sees his own lonely form in that. And you notice the very first person that he says something to, he talks to, is yet again a little boy. And so that boy at the keyhole and this boy with the turkey is just, and the vast difference. It's a different Scrooge between those two.
So here's something that I noticed in his interaction with that little boy. That's lovely. And look at this. He says to the little boy, "Do you know the poulterers, the one in the next street at the corner?" And he says, "I should hope I did," which is horribly, I don't know, ignorant language, right?
Right.
He should say, "I should hope I do."
Mm-hmm.
And Scrooge's response is, "An intelligent boy, a remarkable boy."
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So there is one place where a child is not ignorant.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the robe,
right.
but
That's
redeemed
beautiful.
with
That's right.
what's under it is redeemed.
That's right.
Or
Oh, that's
or
lovely.
different, yeah.
Hmm.
It's amazing because every time I read this, it all seems just very realistic until I recognize what the spiritual shift provides, still keeping everything within the flesh. I mean, this is just another boy, and yet somehow it's the boy under the cloak changed.
That's right.
And that's a complete mystery.
That's right. An intelligent boy.
Yes.
What is the sound rippling through the air? It's the sound of pealing bells, which I just love.
That's right. Which we've seen, obviously, right?
Indeed, Dickens is both wonderful at creating atmosphere, creating a sort of multi-sensory imaginative experience. I mean, he throws open the window and you can immediately just get a sense of the world in its crystalline quality, but also the sort of the pealing of the bells, which obviously he is brilliantly creating a scene, but he's also drawing back to the tolling of the bells happening through the night, which is such an ominous sound of foreboding. It's like the countdown to whatever punishment is going to befall him next. And now it is like the sound of his own heart. It is the sort of exuberance and exaltation of his own soul. And so the bells almost are reflective of where he is in the midst of his own process of transformation, which I love.
This is Bell. This is B-E-L-L-E.
That's right.
Two, as we've noticed. And interestingly enough, in Roman Catholic theology, in some areas, they would say that whenever a soul is saved, the bells will peal. Mm-hmm. And so at least one critic is asked whether these bells are singing and ringing so loudly, not just for Scrooge's change, but maybe for something that Marley gets out of this, or some of those other people out the window.
Or all of us, to Roy's point,
of course.
How we are the ones who are invited into this transformation, how the story is really about us. So if that's the case, then the bells must toll in an extended way.
May that be said of us and all of us.
Oh, stop! I'm gonna cry again.
It's the cry of joy, though.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Let's go, can we go to the turkey for a minute, because it's another example of extravagance. And it's the thing that the economists of the time criticized Dickens for, because somebody had to go without in order for Cratchit family to have a turkey. And in fact, we don't go to the Cratchit family. We don't see them ever having more than enough.
No.
And Dickens got a turkey, an enormous turkey, for Christmas of 1839, which was just 4 years previously. And he sends a very funny letter on the 2nd of January of 1840, saying that that bird had lasted through 3 gills and 4 breakfasts and 2 lunches, and there wasn't an atom of something left on it even for breakfast today. So for Dickens, at least, there is this enormously complicated sort of feeling about getting that. It is a superabundance. And if that's a bad thing, no, not here, not now. But he was very touched by the fact that he was criticized for the turkey gift. That really bothered him a lot. It was as if you can't ever let go in this world.
I find that to be the epitome of cynicism. I mean, that you would read into this story. I mean, you just talk about hearts of stone. Like the place you have to live permanently in order to read this story and to interpret that particular element and others as some sort of like
negative, right?
Yes, I'm just like, what? How does that? How can you get to that place? And let's help you. Let's help you get out of it.
The next Christmas book tells you exactly that, and maybe we should do the chimes next year. That would be fun.
Well, the only sign we get of the enjoyment of this turkey is Bob Cratchit coming late to work the next day. And
just one thing before we get there, just one tiny little thing. And that is what you'll see there right there, because it comes up 2 times. And that is that when he's writing the address to give to the poulterer, the hand in which he wrote the address was not a steady one. And later, when he starts shaving, it's really difficult for him to shave because his hands are trembling. And you remember, we've seen trembling hands before. In fact, we saw it last week with the spirit showing him his, that hand starts trembling. And so yet again, it's just, for me at least, this is just so beautiful. And the way in which Dickens, again, it's an incredibly short stave. If you're not going to read anything else, read this stave, but of course it's not going to make any sense unless you read. But it's incredible. I read the whole thing in like 12 minutes. I mean, it was like, it took no time at all, but it's so beautiful how little tiny themes from previous ones get interleaved and interwoven into this one, just like that trembling hand. So it's almost as if Scrooge is like an incarnation of all those previous spirits.
Remember, in the first stave, Scrooge's hand was good for anything name was good for anything he set his hand to. And Dickens added he set his hand to after we'd written it out to begin with. And it's on change. Change, his hand is good for anything. But it meant exchange, and it's the same thing that happens in the first stave, as Rebecca pointed out, about there are no first names. Ebenezer does come up, I think, in the first stave, but Bob is just a coin, 15 of his own, So that change is all about money, and this change and trembling is all about life.
Mother Rebecca, I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
That's all right. Here's another example of that. He dressed himself all in his best. We've seen him dressed all in his best. Actually, we haven't. We've seen the best of it having been removed from his dead body and pawned off in a shop, right? And here he chooses those clothes and puts them on.
Yeah, we know that. Yeah. So we've seen the shirt before. Yeah.
There's not any hole in it.
That's right.
It is holy, but not.
That's right.
Yeah. No,
Oh,
all I was going to
gosh.
say, and it wasn't to take us to the end, all I was going to observe is that the only thing we ever know about how the Cratchit family enjoyed the turkey is that Bob's a little late to work and says he had a little bit of merrymaking.
That's right.
And that's all we ever see about that extraordinary, extravagant turkey. There's no effusive, somebody sent us the biggest turkey in the whole wide world. It was just, we
Right.
just really had an
right.
extraordinary day yesterday.
That's right.
Yeah, he certainly doesn't show up and say, "Thank you, sir, for the turkey," because the turkey would never have come from Scrooge. Like,
That's
not in
exactly.
his wildest imagination would he have thought that it would have come from his boss.
One of our listeners had said something about the Muppet Christmas, and that Miss Piggy really nails Mrs. Cratchit, and she does, because when Scrooge goes back to the Cratchit household, Miss Piggy just jumps on him for all his badness, and we don't see that.
Yeah.
The layering of the spirits on top, how he has essentially become a manifestation of all three, which I think is wonderful. I'm thinking about his line, "I will live in the past and the present and the future," really captures that perfectly. Like, he is trying to own the shared experiences of the past, the present, and the future. And even now, like when he wakes up, he is lost, like he's totally discombobulated, right? He doesn't know what day it is. He has to ask the boy or the passerby to tell him what day it is. And the most wonderful thing of all, the thing that might actually elicit from him the sobbing is the discovery that it's today, like that it's now, and that the redemption that he's been offered, the sort of gift of everything, is actually not that he's been sent back to fix the things that he did, nor is he been like propelled into the future and missed several weeks of Christmas and skipped over it, and it really did take a month or whatever, but that he now gets to go right back into his life, because the redemption is the point of it all is now, and that the hope of it all is in what he chooses to do from now on.
That's right. At the whole, it's called the end of it, but the first, right? Yes. And the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. And best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in.
But
So,
and Mother Rebecca wanted to say something too, and all I want to add is that another way of thinking about that past, present, and future is that Scrooge has recovered his childhood self. He is a child, and he brings that child with him now into the present. Not the sad child, but the child that was cared for in the end, and the child at Fezziwig's. So he hasn't lost everything in the past either.
Right. There's something about the redemption that he's experiencing in the present, having effect both in the past and into the future. A little bit like someone we know who might have died on a cross and rose again, with effect into the past and into the future. And you see, if you read through it, it is so short, but read through it again and you'll find lots of places where you see him living into the past, into the present, and into the future, right? So he makes a charitable donation to the guys who came by yesterday, but also there's a great many back payments included in that,
nice.
right?
Nice.
And Tiny Tim, who did not die, right? So there's a future-reaching effect of his action today. So it's sort of fun to read.
It goes out to Father Casey's point. It goes out into the whole world as good old man, as the good old town, and any good old town in the whole good old world, too, which is that redemption that Scrooge saw about Christmas in the third stage, when they traveled across the whole world and saw miners in Cornwall and lighthouse keepers and people at sea. So that's, Father Casey again and Roy both saying, this is for us.
That's right.
To experience.
Yeah. I keep coming back because I can't shake them, the economists or the social commentators who begrudge the big turkey. And And instead of like critiquing the turkey as having taken away from someone else who like deserved it or something, I'm really just struck by how the reclamation, I love that word, that the reclamation of Scrooge's soul, I think that's in the first stave, is, I mean, like in the first, hour of his newfound heart of flesh, newly implanted, newly graced heart of flesh, he is quite extravagant. As fast as he can, he is giving away. And I am actually struck by how the reclamation of his soul does involve the diminishment of his accounts, right? Like his accounts are going to get smaller, but that is part of how this becomes healed. It's not just in feelings and emotions. It's not just in like goodwill and, you know, sweet thoughts from Tiny Tim. It's also in Scrooge is going to have to like do something different with his checkbook.
Right.
And isn't it peculiar that Scrooge thought everything he owned was lost in stave 4, and now he knows that everything he owns needs to be distributed. And that's another sign of this kind of total reclamation.
Yeah.
I never knew that until Father Casey taught me that. Roy taught me that. Rebecca taught me. I mean, I have to rewrite this chapter, but I've done it enough.
So Carolyn Lewis has commented to your point, Casey, even Judas criticized the woman who used the perfume for Jesus's feet, which is such a great parallel with those who would say, how come you wasted so much on that one turkey? You know,
Nice burn, Carolyn. That was excellent.
Yeah, really, really good. And Lane.
And actually, it's a comparable scene in Luke's gospel that got me thinking about the sobs of joy when the quote sinful woman is weeping and anointing Jesus's feet with her tears, and it is they are tears because she has experienced the mercy and forgiveness of God in this moment, and what it elicits from her is this manifestation of just emotion, raw emotion, but also of a physical expression. She does the only thing that is possible to her. She lavishes Jesus with love and anoints him. And it's a comparable passage to that one of the woman who uses the pound of costly perfume. But it gets me thinking that, you know, like your emotion then leads you into response. And such a profound and tender moment, and Scrooge is now full of newfound tenderness that had been at least absent from the way Dickens told him.
And as Rebecca said to begin with, the bathing, about water cleansing is there in the washing of the feet with the tears, but here in various intimations.
Father Casey, because you're bringing up the economists and the literary critics who sort of poo-poo this whole story, it's kind of funny is that those economists and those literary critics actually come in at the end of it, right? At the end of this stave, right? Some people laughed, and this isn't a nice laughter. This is a mean laughter, right? Some people laughed to see the alteration in it, but he let them laugh and little heeded them because he finally, he's no longer ignorant, right? He was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people do not have their fill of laughter at the outset. And knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, you say he's no longer the ignorant one, but maybe those economists and maybe those literary critics, maybe they just refuse to see. They would be blind anyway. He thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes and grins as have the malady in a less attractive form. So again, it's kind of funny that they really bother you, because it seems as though they probably perhaps bothered Dickens as well, because he has them trot out at the very end. So
can we go back to the illustration that's just before that?
yeah.
Because we looked at the illustration in stave 1 of the ghost of Marley's ghost coming into Scrooge's reception room. And this is the same reception room. Now, the text just before this says, Scrooge says to Bob that they will talk about the future this afternoon, he said, over a bowl of smoking bishop. And then at the top of the next page on the first edition is the next line, which says, meanwhile, Bob, put another coal on the fire and go out to get a new coal scuttle. So I've read this book, for some 70 of my 80 years, and always just assumed this was in the office, but it's not.
No.
It's not. This is at home in the afternoon, and Bob goes out of the office in the morning to get a new coal scuttle. So it's the same fireplace with its petrification of a hearth, but with the kettle steaming and the bowl of punch steaming and the fire steaming, but all encased in a domestic seat. It's not burning down. And Scrooge is on the chair where the Ghost of Christmas Present was and where Scrooge was. And Bob Cratchit is where Marley came in. That's the table that things rested on in all three. And those are the extra bottles of wine. When I looked at this and thought it was in the office, I thought, gee, Scrooge had actually already brought in 2 more bottles of wine. No, this is at home where he's restocked. And there's that candle. It had a face on it. It doesn't have a face now, but it's really shining a light through the room. It's almost as bright, obscuring even the details of the background as was the cap of Christmas Past.
And it looks like there's decorations. There looks like there's holly, or
There's holly that left behind by the Ghost of Christmas Present.
Is that beautiful?
So this is a picture of the transformed room. Now, in the third stave, it was a surprising transformation that took place with a spirit. But here, the spirit is in the flesh and in the reality of the room. And it is a transformed room. I think that's another way this insists on the existence of that transformation in a more permanent way.
And if you can see my camera, it's the Ghost of Christmas Present, and he has his feet in exactly the same position. It's up on that, so it's just a beautiful. I mean, he becomes the incarnation of Christmas Present. So.
Oh, I don't have.
And that's what that paragraph is about, how his influence extended as far along as the Ghost of Christmas Present did when he was sprinkling joy to the world. Now that may be material joy, but of course it was also the joy of the birth of the Savior.
Yeah. Oh, and to know that Dickens had, I mean, that is not accidental. Leach didn't draw that accidentally. He probably consulted with Dickens, and so the scene with Cratchit, that's totally intentional. I love that.
That's right, and there was a wonderful article written 2 decades ago in Yale Library Chronicle, and I didn't get it until recently, and so somebody's jumped on this and its importance as the transformation of that room and that spirit before me. But Leach got it in this book. Leach makes a huge number of mistakes in later books, puts people into the scene that don't belong there and were never there. And I can excuse that by saying, well, that's what the reader believed, that there was that person in that scene. But here, Dickens must have known the end of it from the beginning for Leach to be able to make that sequence of images of a transformation.
There he is. Yeah.
So definitely these decorations that are there at the end are still there from the visit.
Yeah. That's
actually the fireplace, I think, there's scenes in those tiles. I've forgotten what it said precisely about those scenes.
They're biblical scenes.
Yeah. So when we get to the end
of it,
I think the only ending is the ending to us of this reading, but not the ending of the effect of this reading. And I don't know how much time we have left, but when we're getting close to the end, I just want to point out two other little things in the very last sentences. Is that okay?
We
Yes.
have 5 minutes, so now's the
Oh,
time.
all right. Well, maybe somebody in the audience will want to say something. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle. That's a joke about alcoholism. And it was always said of him, that he knew how to keep Christmas well if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us and all of us. There's the individual, and then the reader, us, and then the whole of us, and then the brilliant last words.
Mhm.
And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, every one. And sometimes that is every single person distinguished. And sometimes, especially in the adaptations, God bless us, everyone, the whole. And everyone works both ways. So Dickens can get you with an individual and with everybody in the world.
And again, just going back to that first stave, right? When that little boy bends down at that keyhole, he does not sing, God rest ye merry gentlemen. He sings, God bless you, merry gentleman. The exact same thing that Tiny Tim says at the very end. And so yet again, a beautiful bookend. And by the end of the book, Scrooge is blessed. And I would say we all are, right? So,
Is it COVID this year that makes this message even more, for some of you, personal than maybe other years? I just have a different feeling about, partly because of our conversation, but partly somehow this hope has been so lacking this year in our future hopes, and it seems a real message of the present for me.
I read an editorial in the Times yesterday, maybe, that talked about that this precise thing, that in the midst of this year, A Christmas Carol is one of the only things that has maintained its firm hold on our collective societal imagination, and that performances and adaptations and the sort of collective embrace of the story is perhaps stronger than ever.
So,
talking about the Times, there's also an editorial about what is death. And I know we want to end on a high note on this thing, but it is an interest, right? The thing that actually causes him at the end to change is, you know what? And at the end of this editorial, I was going to mention this. So the question is, what is death? If in the editorial writer says, if I had to answer the question today, I would say that for me, death is when I can no longer engage with the world around me, when I can no longer take anything in and therefore can no longer connect. At times, social distancing has me wondering if I'm there already, but that's just me missing people that I care about. There are still ways to connect with others, including the bittersweet act of missing them. There you go.
About with every New Year's or every Christmas, the dead are with you to be remembered, lamented, and brought in again into the fold. And this book I'm mysteriously writing, and I hope will get published, is called Dickens, Death, and Christmas. And I started writing it well before COVID, but maybe it was a prophetic impulse on my part. Because to begin with, Marley was dead to begin with, raises all the questions about what kind of an end there can be after that.
Yeah,
That's right.
mm,
It's kind of funny, right? You begin with the end. In my own copy, right, I have this stupid thing marked up like a Bible. But yeah, Marley was dead to begin with, and I just have written begin with the end. And what's interesting is that, in fact, you end, in a sense, you end at the beginning, because as soon as we close the book, that's when this actually has a beginning in our own lives. So.
Yeah. I just finally connected the dots of Dickens's life and realized that he was only about 30 years old when he wrote this.
Mhm.
And I
31
just-
years old.
I marvel at that relatively early in his, in his literary career, that he was able to sort of summon this level of understanding. And I mean, this is no knock on people who are 30. My 30-year-old self probably hated me saying any of this, but I just really marvel at how he wrote this story at that stage in his life.
And let me tell you, he did some of the most bitter, sarcastic, Swiftian publications at this very same time, furious with all the churches, Protestant, Roman Catholic, non-denominational, that wouldn't get together to teach simple things to children collaboratively so that they would grow up with some kind of spiritual and moral education. And he just raked people over the coals. I can't even read it here, but he compares the University of Oxford to a manufacturing plant and says the manufacturing plant takes care of its people better than the University of Oxford does. And they're stuck in 500-year-old ignorance. So the goodness that comes in this is not without all those other pressures in him that get transformed in the very writing.
And yet when he summons something different from within his own experience, and I would say that there is definitely something providential. There is something that transcends Dickens' own self.
Yes.
That is imbued in this. When he's able to summon that or be a vessel for that, look at the timelessness of this story in 2020, in the midst of this particularly awful crisis. Hear these words, not his biting satirical critiques of 1840 England, not his later works and perhaps his more esteemed literary works, but this particular little novella is the one that continues to hold us enthralled and to inspire and provoke us.
That's why it's included in the Bible.
Indeed. Yes. The Holy Writ of Roy Heller.
But it's after Revelation.
We'll end on a high note, right?
This has
Thank
been
you,
such a
guys.
joy and a delight, as we've said several times. Thank you for coming along for this series of conversations that we've had. Bob and Roy especially, thank you for giving of your time these several weeks. I'm aware of the time and aware that Father Casey and I need to be, we need to play with our clothes and make lacoons really quickly so we can get outside. So let's just end with God bless us, everyone.
Amen.
And
Goodbye,
Beautiful.
friends.
Bye,
Thank you for
everybody.
joining us.
Bob, Roy, thank you so
all.
much.
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Bye-bye.